Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Ubuntu 25.04 desktop. So right here we are on the login screen, and first thing I want to point out is we're using the GDM3 display manager. That's what it comes with by default. So also I want to point out that we're using Wayland by default. So when you click on the username here, once you click on the username, a little gear icon appears in the lower right here. You can barely see it because it's small, but you can click on this and select your session. We have Ubuntu, which is Wayland, and Ubuntu on Xorg, which is X11. So you can change that if you want to, and if you installed KDE or whatever else, you could select that from there too. So we're going to go ahead and log in here. And here's our desktop. So this is GNOME. So this is GNOME 46 as the default desktop environment. And under Wayland, GNOME uses Mutter as its native Wayland compositor and window manager. If you log in under X11, it still uses Mutter, but it's basically just the X11 window manager, not the Wayland compositor. So first question we want to ask before we start poking around here is, how is the install? Well, let's cut away and go through that real quick. All right, we're going to go through this install really quick in 1 minute out of this 50-minute video. So let's just blast through this. Basically, select the language, hit next, next, next for keyboard layout, internet, install. Now here, this is actually important. Do you want the default install with the basics, or do you want the extended stuff like Office tools, utilities, the web browser, that kind of stuff? I actually selected that because I felt like it would be a good demo. And here we're selecting third-party tools, multimedia, codec, stuff like that. That's important too if you want that stuff to actually work. Like if you're using this as a desktop system, we're going to erase the whole disk. Select the disk we want to install to. Selecting no encryption right now, but if you want encryption, especially on a laptop, select it. Here we put in our username or password, no Active Directory, and we're going to go ahead, select our time zone, and continue on here. We're going to click install, and there we go. We sped ahead and it's installed. Just reboot the system now, and we are good to go. Working Ubuntu system. All right, so that was real fast. Now, one thing I want to point out, it does have encryption support. It's optional. We didn't select it this time. So next thing I want to show you is the disk layout. And I'm going to show you that from the command line first. So GNOME terminal, and I'm actually going to drag this over here because that's one thing that you just always have to have on your bar. Now let's open this up and let's take a look at how our partitioning is. So we're going to say df-h by default here. You can see SDA2 is our root file system. Then you have SDA1, boot EFI, and this is just the USB drive that I still have in the system. So if we do ls-blk, you're going to see so you already see all these loopback devices for all the snaps that are installed. A lot of people find that annoying, but it's no big deal really. So this is our actual SSD that we installed our system on, and you'll notice it has two partitions, root and EFI. And our swap partition is just a file, not a partition. We'll take a look at that in a bit too. So next, let's take a look at our FS tab, cat etc FS tab. So right here, here's our root file system, and you see it is an ext4 file system, so pretty standard. It's not wild and experimental like BTRFS, which is actually also pretty stable these days, but this is more of like I feel like this is a more standard, sensible choice for your default root file system. You have right here, you see we have our VFAT formatted boot EFI partition. It just has to be formatted VFAT, and for UEFI to be able to boot from it. Anyways, here is our swap image. So it's just a file on a root file system that's used for swap. It's a little bit more flexible than using a partition. So next thing I wanted to show you is how this looks from the GNOME disk manager. So let's just, or GNOME disk. So that should be installed by default. And here we go, disks. So this is a great graphical tool for looking at disks and partitions. This is our system disk, our SSD. You can see this one's a USB drive. Really great tool here. So here's our EFI partition. A little bit of free space left at the end. And here is our root partition. See at dev SDA2, mounted at, right here, file system root. So that's basically how all the partitioning and stuff looks. Now, let's before we look at any other features or anything else about this installation, let's talk about what Ubuntu is. Quick background on the OS, what sets it apart. Ubuntu is based on Debian, but it generally, the packages are going to be more up to date, and it has a bunch of tweaks and enhancements for better or worse, depending on your viewpoint. But they have a bunch of Ubuntu specific tweaks and enhancements. For example, they have Snapd installed, and GNOME has some extensions installed. For example, the bar here is always is not hidden by default. It's not on the bottom. With a vanilla GNOME, this bar is going to be on the bottom and it's hidden by default. So you'd have to click on this thing or hit the super button and then click on this thing to get to all your applications and stuff. So this is a little bit different from default GNOME. They modified GNOME to make it look a little bit nicer and be more practical from my point of view. I think it's a little bit better. And they've added some things like Snapd and stuff like that, newer projects. They've added, they've changed things with networking a little bit too. With NetPlan, they're using NetPlan to generate Network Manager, and even for the server edition of this, for your systemd network configurations, it's all generated by NetPlan. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, more about what's good and bad. All right, yeah, so we're going to cover a little bit more about what's good and bad about this, what I thought about it after we demo things. So at the end of this video, we're going to talk about, what's good and bad about Ubuntu versus, other distros and stuff like that. So next thing I want to show you, let's close this and let's take a look at the kernel. So clear this out, uname-a. You can see here we have kernel version 6.14.0-23 generic, so it's a generic build. Any case, yeah, it should be built specifically for Ubuntu. They have their customizations in there. But anyways, let's take a look at here. Cat etc issue. This is the message that's going to get issued to you when you log in. Ubuntu, it just gives you the Ubuntu version. You can check etc OS release as well for the pretty name, the version. The code name is Plucky Puffin, which you see here in the default wallpaper. You see this nice puffin here. Now, let's see what else we want to take a look at. One thing that I want to note is the NVIDIA drivers. So before we look at anything else, and before looking at NVIDIA drivers, I want to point out that Wi-Fi is working here. I'm using a wired connection. We're going to look at that in a little bit later too. But if you look at Wi-Fi, I'm not using Wi-Fi now, but it's working. So the driver works for it. You can see some access points in my area. I'm not connecting to any of them though, because I have a wired connection that's faster. So I did want to show you the NVIDIA drivers. These are installed. The proprietary drivers are installed by default. Some people, for whatever reason, if they want to be purists, might want the open source drivers, which are okay for most use, so long as you're not doing anything like, gaming or anything like that. But the proprietary drivers are going to be a whole lot faster than the open source Nuevo drivers. So anyways, let's take a look here. lsmod. Whoops. That's can't type today. All right, let's clear this. lsmod and rep-i NOU. So nothing here. So the old new open source Nuevo driver is not there. But if you search for NVI, whoops, NVI, I should clear that again. Yeah, this is the proprietary NVIDIA driver. Now, this is directly from NVIDIA. From what I've heard, apparently NVIDIA has open sourced this, created their own open source driver, and that's actually the preferred driver. So this may or may not be, I'm not sure if this is NVIDIA's proprietary driver or NVIDIA's open source driver. One way or another, this is the preferred driver from NVIDIA, whereas the open source third-party driver, Nuevo, is not preferred. In any case, this is for the NVIDIA supplied driver. This is what we want, right? So it comes installed by default, which is great. You don't have to do it like we had to do with Linux Mint, Fedora, or Pop! OS. In any case, and Yeah, I believe my older version of Ubuntu that I was using previously did not have this installed by default, so I had to manually install it. It was pretty easy, a few commands, but you did have to manually do it. So it's kind of nice that this is just installed for you by default. So next thing I want to look at is this bar on the side. So we're in a GNOME environment, right? It's modified though. Normally this bar is not visible, so you're going to go up here and click on this to get to this screen, which is then where this bar would normally appear. And then to get to your applications, you can click on this button down here, which they've customized this with the Ubuntu logo. Normally it wouldn't have that. It would just have a simpler default GNOME icon here, but this gets you to all your applications, and you can search for applications up here or switch desktops up here. If you had just typed this button here, you would just get to this thing where you can switch desktops and stuff, which is great and all. Now, also, if you hit the super button or the Windows key, it brings you to that same scene. So by default, GNOME only wants you to have this little thing at the top and click on this little button to make everything visible. Ubuntu made this whole bar visible. It takes up more space, but I think it looks nicer, and it's nice to have your stuff nice and accessible right here. I like this, but you can choose what you like the best by default. So yeah, this is the bar, and this is, I guess, the closest thing to a menu that they provide. Really, you click on it, it brings you to this separate screen. It's not really a menu, but it's like a screen with all, it's a launcher for all your applications, right? So you've already seen how we can add things to the bar. We move the terminal over there. I'm going to remove help. You can unpin things, and as you unpin them, they'll appear back over here. Now we can, I'm just going to show you how you can move like the calculator over. You can just drag and drop, and there you go. You have it on the bar now, right? So that's how you can add stuff and remove stuff to the bar. Over here, next I'm going to show you, I guess right at the top of the screen here, you can see notifications and a calendar, which is kind of nice. And you can look at different dates and stuff, whatever else. You can see your status and stuff over here. This nice multi-purpose little thing here shows you your network connections, your volume. You can change your volume. You can click on this for more options where you want sound to be going to, headphones, HDMI, whatever else. You click on sound settings to see more details. This brings you to your settings application. You can go here. You have some settings here. This will bring you to the regular settings application. Again, you can lock your desktop. You can log out or power off. Wi-Fi, wired network, all this great stuff. And we'll come back to that. Bluetooth, all the normal stuff. You can select night mode. We're not going to do that yet. You can select dark style here. All that terrific stuff. So the other thing I wanted to show you is workspaces. So switching workspaces, you just click here like we showed you before. You can switch workspaces like that. You can also click this button here and select workspaces like this. And when you do this, you could, let's say if we open, like say the calculator and a file manager over here, right? And let's say if you want to switch workspaces, you can drag one application over like that. And if you were over here, you could drag an application like that, open up a third desktop. Now, one thing to note is that this creates, notice we have another desktop over here. It will always create one more than what you already have. So there's always, this is dynamic desktop. So originally we only had two. As soon as we started using the second one, it created a third. As soon as we drag a window over to your third desktop, it creates yet another one. So you have more space to move things to. It's not a static number of desktops. You can configure it to have a static number of desktops. You might have to install GNOME tweaks or something to do that, but yeah, right now it's using dynamic desktops. I believe you can configure a static number of desktops with GNOME. Any case, let's see, what else do we want to show you? So those are workspace. Also, I should show you, you can say Alt Control and left arrow or right arrow to switch between different desktops. And that's a pretty standard way of doing things. Now you can also hit Alt Tab to switch between applications, and you can hit Alt tilde to switch between instances of an application. So let's say if we open a few more windows of the terminal, right? Now you hit Alt Tab, and you're Alt tabbing between terminal windows and file manager windows. And I believe this behavior is different from the GNOME installation that I saw on Fedora and other distros. I believe these were separated, and it just looked different when you Alt-tabbed. But I can tell you when you do Alt-tilde, it opens up this view. So you can switch between different windows within the same applications using Alt-tilde. Then when you Alt-tab, it just makes it go away. So this Alt-tab view and the Alt-tilde view were more integrated in other GNOME desktops. I think they may be due to Ubuntu tweaking, but I'm not sure. So that's Alt-tab and Alt-tilde. Nice that they have those two different. I normally, that doesn't matter. If I'm switching between windows in one application, Alt-tilde, and if you're switching between any windows, Alt-tab, I think that behavior, that works just fine. I'm okay with that behavior. Anyways, worth being aware of. Another thing you can do, you can slide an application to the side like this, and it will automatically take up this side, and then you can select another application to take the other side of the screen. You can also maximize something by moving it up to the top of the screen. If you hold it there long enough, it can take up half the screen. If you didn't want that, you can, you can slide it up and maximize it like that. You hold it there for two, and that's not supposed to do that. Anyways, hold it there long enough, it takes up half the screen. So you can do both of those things depending on, how long you hold it there. Next, we're going to look at themes and then wallpapers, right? So let's go to just, anything that gets you into settings. You can go to change background, display settings. It'll bring you into your settings. How did I manage to do? All right, here we go. So this is our settings app. This is under appearance. You also have, all right, so wallpapers are under here. Anyways, this is using the default view. So like your bar is dark, your terminal is dark, and your file manager's light. This thing is light. It's kind of a weird mix. You can click on dark, and it makes all of the stuff dark. Looks a lot better. I actually think this bar on it's the wallpaper. This is slightly transparent, so the wallpaper change is what made the bar look different. Wallpaper changes with this dark. So anyways, you can see the accent color's orange. That's just that's pre-selected because this is Ubuntu. We could change this to purple if we wanted. I'm going to stick with orange, right? Now, you have different wallpapers it comes with, which is all fine and great. Let's just set it to this wallpaper so we can see our bar looks a little bit nicer with that purple background. So we can set it to this wallpaper with the dark settings. That's kind of nice. Not a lot of themes by default. You're going to have to install GNOME tweaks and extensions if you want to get themes working on here. It's kind of an uphill battle to get themes working on Ubuntu. I just did a video about setting GNOME themes on Fedora. Now, Ubuntu has altered the themes and stuff by themselves, but they don't give you by default the tools to do that yourself. But you can still go ahead and install them and change the themes if you want. But by default, you just get these two styles and the accent colors and the wallpaper, right? Now, I like this wallpaper better. I'm going to go with this. So that's your appearance and under displays. I've already set the scaling to 200. I think that's the sweet spot. So it's a 4K display. 4K resolution here, but the GUI elements, you want them to be a little bit bigger. You could set them smaller if you like. During the installation process, I had it set to 300 so you could actually see the installer. I'm capturing everything with a video capture device, but in any case, 200 I think is the right scaling for regular desktop use. So once I've got it installed, 200 is fine, right? So let's jump out of here now and so we've looked at themes and wallpapers, just the basic default themes you can choose. If you want to do any more theming than that, it's an uphill battle. You got to install GNOME tweaks or some other software. Now, Wi-Fi and network settings. So I already showed you Wi-Fi is working. This is our wired network. So I'm gonna want to show you. Let's just take a look at this. You can disable it from there. So I'm going to open this and go to wired settings in case you actually want to see the settings for this. This will show you your wired connection, gigabit connection, can enable, disable it, VPN proxy, etc. You click here for settings, and you can change the settings for this, connect automatically, etc., etc. Here's my IP address, link speed, identity, IPv4. We're using DHCP. You can set it statically if you want to, using the command, using this graphical tool here. And you can also use NetPlan to set up a static IP. And right now, so we are using Network Manager. So on the back end, we're using the Network Manager service, which works great with these front-end graphical tools for desktop systems. Typically on a server, you're going to use systemd, network D, which also works with NetPlan. On this desktop system, we're using NetPlan together with Network Manager, which works great with this nice with this nice graphical tool. One problem I had when I first used this, easy fix, but when I first installed this, the network connection was not working. I was getting an IP address, but I was not getting, I was not connecting to the DNS server. It just did not have DNS, and I couldn't connect to the internet because of that. So I have a local DNS server. It's supposed to be given to me by DHCP, and that should be working. So it wasn't working by default. I have not run into this issue before on Ubuntu. So essentially what I did was I jumped in here or actually under identity, and apparently this profile somehow it was enough to get DHCP, but somehow it was not enough to get everything working. So this field here was blank. So I selected from the drop down, I selected EN02 with my MAC address. So I had to manually select this and hit apply. And I guess doing that caused this profile to associate with my actual MAC and let Network Manager know that, hey, it's okay to go ahead and use those DHCP servers that were given to me by DHCP. I don't know why it behaves like that. It should have done that by default, but it required me to do that. It was a little bit wonky. I don't know why it behaved that way, but it did. Once I selected this, it started working magically. So it took a little bit of poking around instead of just working. I still think this is so far the best It Just Works distro that I've tried so far. Anyways, I had to go in and do that. Not hard to do. Still did it through the graphical tool like this, and it worked pretty well. But that was a little bit annoying. Generally, don't have issues like that on Ubuntu, but this time I did. So next thing I'm going to want to show you, I do want to show you another side effect of that. So if you jump over here, and I'm just going to sudo to root here real quick, because some of these permissions on Ubuntu are a little weird. So we're going to jump into the cd etc netplan directory right here. So this is netplan, and alrighty, it looks like it deleted one of my files on me. That is also a little bit strange. So we see two files in here. There was also another file that had a different name for cloud initialization. Now, NetPlan is supposed to be good because these configuration files are easy to parse and easy to configure and great for doing stuff in the cloud. That's why it's the standard way for Ubuntu to do things. Now, NetPlan is used to configure both Network Manager or systemd, network D. In this case, Network Manager, because we are on a desktop system. So anyways, this file was here by default along with one other file. You can cat this, so 01, this is what you get in this file. Tells it to use Network Manager and doesn't do anything else. Everything is going to be controlled by Network Manager. Apparently that wasn't enough. So one thing I noticed after I went in here and selected this, once I associated this MAC address and interface with my network profile, it generated this file right here for me. And at that point, I had three files in here. I don't know where the other one went. I guess it automatically removed it for me. One way or another, it's still working. So that's kind of strange that it does those things automatically for you. A little bit annoying, but anyways, it is what it is. Now, if we take a look, let's cat out this file right here that it generated for me. So it is matching this name for the interface and this MAC address. So it's associating, it's saying, hey, whatever interface matches this, make sure you use the network manager renderer. So the renderer is what's going to manage your network for you. It's telling it use network manager. The other option would typically be systemd network D, right? And sets, tells it to use DHCP, and it associates it with this with profile 1 under network manager, which is what we can see over here in the graphical tool. This is profile 1 right here, identity profile 1 associated with this MAC address. So this graphical tool told network manager to, I guess, generate this config file for netplan, and now netplan is controlling network manager. Just to use this profile, to use DHCP and all this other nice stuff. So it's doing that. A little bit annoying how that behaves, but I guess there's a good reason. So I personally don't like netplan that much, but it is what it is. Anyways, I'll mention a little bit more about that later, but let's move along to some of the other features. So one thing I wanted to point out is that Ubuntu uses AppArmor. It's enabled by default, and it provides per application security policies. So AppArmor is kind of like Ubuntu's answer to basically like Ubuntu's answer to SE Linux. So like Red Hat systems have SE Linux, Ubuntu has AppArmor, right? And now I have yet to ever have any real issues with AppArmor, but it does let you assign permissions for like which application and which process can access which things on your system. So you can see there are, if you take a look here, let's take a look in Etsy AppArmor.d. You can see their configuration files for all your different applications and stuff on your system, and you can use these to configure stuff on your system. We're not going to get into configuring AppArmor, but you'd refer to these if you want to actually enable, disable things with AppArmor, stuff like that. So you can also do AA status just to view the status of AppArmor. Now, if you would need to use sudo, if you are not logged in as root, you're going to need sudo to run that command. And same deal with AppArmor status. So that's AA status. You can also do AppArmor status. I guess that's the same command. So probably aliased, but you're going to need sudo to look at that. Now, for the firewall, pretty much as of Ubuntu 22.04 and onwards, so that's including 25.04, which we're using now, Ubuntu uses NF tables by default, but IP tables is still supported through compatibility layers. There's also a front end for the firewall called UFW, Uncomplicated Firewall. This is a front end. It's a default user-friendly command line front end for managing firewall rules. So I'm going to log out of root just to show you how you do this with sudo. So you can run sudo UFW status, and the firewall is inactive at the moment. You can enable it if you want to, but I'm not going to do that right now. So if you wanted to install it, you could just do a sudo apt install UFW. If it weren't installed, then you would be able to install it. It is installed by default, so there you go. That's the front end firewall command line tool. Now, if you wanted, there's another tool called GUFW. It's a GUI tool to manage UFW. That is not installed by default. You could install that pretty easily using apt or using your Ubuntu Software Center, however you prefer to do that. But there is a graphical tool for that as well. So next thing I want to show you is default RAM usage. So free-h. So got 32 gigs of RAM in the system, shows up as 30 right here. Now used, we're using 2.3 gigs of RAM by default just to run this desktop and whatever's running right now. So we have 22 gigs free, but that's not we have more than that available. We have 27 gigs available. So 22 free, and we're using 5.8 gigs for buffering and caching. So if we needed this RAM, it would be taken away from the buffers and caches, and we could still use this RAM. So this is available RAM. So combine your free and buffered cached RAM, that's your available RAM. And then your used RAM is what's actually really being used, and this is your total RAM. Swap space, we have 8 gigs of swap. 0 is used, 8 gigs are free. So that's our default RAM usage. Now, Another thing to point out, we are using Pipewire as a replacement for Pulse Audio, and there's one other component that it combines the functionality of in there as well, but Pipewire, the modern choice, and it is what is installed here. Now, as far as multimedia support out of the box, versus extra steps, everything should be working on here. We should have all the codecs and everything. I'm not testing it right now, but generally no issues with Ubuntu. I believe we selected that during install, and we should have everything just working nice and easy. No need to go and install that manually like we had to do with Fedora. It's all just working by default, so we can play whatever video or audio files we want by default. So that's kind of a nice feature. You don't have to add any extra repos or anything like that. Now, the terminal right here should be GNOME terminal. Let's take a look here. And GNOME terminal as expected. No huge surprise there. Now, our file manager here, this should be files, which I believe is still GNOME files. The GNOME files, the GNOME projects. They just changed the name of this. So Nautilus. It's still Nautilus. Files, also known as Nautilus. Yeah, the old name of this, Nautilus. That's what this was called back in the olden days. They changed the name from this nice, unique name that sets this apart as a different file manager from other file managers that are out there. They just decided to call it files as though this is the default thing you would use for files, and they're kind of ignoring the existence of other file managers and making it it's descriptive as to what it does, but it doesn't set it apart as a separate a separate piece of software. I don't know. I don't feel like it's distinctive enough. But anyways, the GNOME Files tool, not a bad tool. Now, when you click on here, by default, you can edit this. Now, in previous versions of this tool, of GNOME, and this Files tool, when you clicked here, you would just be, like, let's say you're in Documents. Now, you can see how these are components you can click on. You can click here to go home, right? That's useful, but then how do you get back to your root file system if you want to browse the file system? That would be a bit of a pain. Fortunately, you can just click here and edit this by hand, which is nice. It used to be, I think you had to put Control L or something like that to unlock the title bar to actually edit this by hand. Now, go to Documents. If you click over here, not clicking on a component of the path, you can just click here and edit this by default. Super easy. It works a little bit nicer than previous versions of GNOME, so I like that. That's nice. That's how it should work. And overall, this is a nice file manager. It looks nice, gives you all the features and stuff you would probably want from a file manager. I'm happy with this myself. Now, as far as text editors, by default, what do we have here? I'm not even seeing anything right here. There should be something under utilities, maybe. There has to be. I know it should have gedit by default, but they replaced gedit with something else. Text editor right here. Well, I don't know why they don't put that right there at the front. But all right, let's place it right here. Text editor. This is not gedit. They replaced gedit with this other text editor called text editor. Not a creative name, but this is not gedit. So they've actually replaced GNOME text editor. They, instead of renaming gedit, they actually replaced it with this new text editor. I don't like that. I think that's the wrong choice. I don't know why they had to get rid of gedit, but anyways, nothing wrong with this one. You get multiple tabs, syntax highlighting, all the normal stuff you would expect. It's a nice text editor anyways. I still don't know why they had to get rid of gedit, but it is what it is. Maybe there was a good reason for it. So the browser that comes, gives you this email client. I generally just use webmail these days, but if you have a need for that, it's great to have it. I don't use it. It's a nice looking icon. I can say that much. Now, by default, this comes with Firefox, which is great. Nothing wrong with it. Some people prefer, some people prefer Chrome or Chromium or Brave or whatever your browser is. You can install that pretty easily on Ubuntu. By default, comes with Firefox. I think this is a reasonable choice. You can install Firefox themes if you want, but this is what it comes with by default. Not a bad choice here, right? Pretty standard stuff, not a surprise for a Linux distro to come with. Now, I did select during installation, I didn't go with the minimal default stuff. I clicked the button to add more stuff like Office software and stuff like that. So when you go over here, you notice it comes with LibreOffice and all the regular stuff, LibreOffice Math, Impress, Draw, Calc, all that normal LibreOffice stuff. Comes with some extra things here. These are pretty standard. Stuff like this, video player. So I did select for it to add that stuff. I'm not sure what else besides Libra. And this is a game I installed, free open source game. Install that through the Software Center. It didn't come with this by default. I installed this one. But I'm not sure what else besides LibreOffice you get when you click that button to install extra software during the installation process. But this is what it gives you by default. Now, it does not give you GIMP by default. I can understand that's a pretty reasonable choice. Now searching, I don't know why it has. I wish this would just search what's on your system, but I think this is searching everywhere for GIMP. That's a little bit silly, but it is what it is. Anyways, doesn't give you GIMP by default. I always like to have GIMP installed on pretty much every desktop system I use, almost all the time. But it's a pretty reasonable choice not to install it by default. You just need to be able to view images, not be able to edit them by default. So that's pretty reasonable. So next thing I want to take a look at is the package manager and the Software Center. So for package management, so we have the default tool to install DEV packages, dpkg-l. You can view packages on your system and install individual packages. You also have apt, so you could do sudo apt install and type the name of the package you want to install, like GIMP. You can install GIMP that way. And this also comes with, it does not come with Flatpak by default, but it does come with snaps by default. So snaps are a little bit controversial, but it comes with snaps and the snap store instead of Flatpak. So snap list. There you go. There's a list of the snaps installed on the system, right? So you have the dpackage tool, and then you have the apt tool for installing. That's the main package manager for installing Debian packages from the repo. You can also use install snaps using snap list. Now, sometimes when you use apt to install a package, it's going to be by default. It's just going to go without asking your permission. Go ahead and install the snap version of that package. And a lot of people find that annoying. I find that annoying. It's okay that it has snaps and some packages are only snaps, but the fact that it lets you use apt and then it's going to redirect you to a snap, that's a little bit annoying. It shouldn't behave that way. Anyways, let's take a look at the graphical tools. So right here on the bar, the App Center. I normally don't keep that on the bar, but here's your App Center. You can explore different applications you can install, a bunch of different apps out there, productivity, featured, or search for applications. So let's search for the GIMP. Now, GNU Image Manipulation Program, Debian. All right, so it looks like we could install the Debian package. This is going to give us 3021. So it looks like we do have the option to install the Debian package if we wanted to, or the snap package, which is 304. So we got 304 if we're installing the snap package, and if we're installing the Debian package, it's 302. So a slightly older version. So it looks like it gives you the choice. On other systems like Linux Mint, you would search for, or even like Fedora, you would search for the application. Like you can click on the application and then you can choose from a drop down. Do you want like the Flatpak version or the DEB version? Here you're going to select. It's like they're different things. You can, but still you do kind of have a choice. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to install this because it's newer and it's not a big deal having it installed as a snap. So channel, you can choose what channel you want to install it from. This might give you different like you do. It's doing latest 304 by default. For GIMP, you should do the latest, but you can install this. You can just go to the latest or choose this manually, or the, this older one, whatever. I'm doing this. This is the way to go. This is how you would install GIMP, right? So it's installing. It takes a little while. Actually, that's going to be done in just a second here. So almost there. Okay, it's taking a little longer than I thought. So one thing I wanted to show you while that goes is updates. So if you go here and you search for update, you'll notice there's two tools. Now this is for managing updates. And if you go here, this will manage the settings for updates, but also your repo settings for the Software Center and all your all your package management, right? But we can get to this tool from here. We'll show you that in a little bit. So let's click here to manage updates. And that is taking a second to actually launch. That's kind of a, what is going on with that? All right, click here to manage updates, and it's not doing it. Maybe that's because it's in the middle of installing this. All right, there we go. Maybe it's running a little bit slow because I have an installation going on. I should install a little faster than this. Anyways, from here brings us to, okay, maybe I got those backwards. These are the settings. So let's search for that again. Update. So this is the settings, and this is the actual I had those reversed. So this is the actual update manager. So click on this. All right, it's going to have to query for new updates because this is the first time I'm doing this. Actually, I did do this yesterday, so it should have I guess it's querying again to get the latest and greatest list. So that's why it's saying, and I already have an installation going. So that's why it's a little bit on the slow side, but here we go. Brings this up and it will say, hey, updates are available, and say, remind me later, install now if you want to. So this is basically just a tool for updating your system. You can get details of what it's installing, and you can select or unselect, what updates are there and what's going to be installed on your system, right? So pretty standard, simple, straightforward update tool. Now, if you click on settings over here, that is going to bring up this other app that we had before. And this allows you, and it brings you up here to the updates tab. You can select, when you want it to update, and, if you want it to notify you, stuff like that. You can do some authentication stuff, additional drivers. So you can select the NVIDIA driver that you want. We got the proprietary driver. It's using the recommended driver for my GPU. So this is nice. You can control your drivers and stuff like that. Have some developer options. Not going to mess around with that. And updates. Yeah, we looked at that. Other software. So these are some repos that are installed. And so we have Universe and Multiverse. And you could add repos like this if you want to add a new repo to your software center. And you can do, you can select these. These are like baked in here, so you don't get to edit these unless you go to the command line. But you can enable this if you wanted to. I don't want to enable that, but you can enable and disable these baked in Ubuntu repos if you want to. You can choose where you want to install from. I'm going to keep that at its default, but this is how you configure your repos and stuff like that. This is how you manage your updates. So that's basically how updates and repo configuration works. And looks like it has crashed on me. All right, don't send it. Probably because I'm doing too many of those things. I don't know. I'm not going to make excuses for it. It crashed on me. Okay, so GIMP is installed now. I could open it from here, or you could search here. GIMP is now on our system. It deserves a launcher icon, right? Click on GIMP. And it's always slow. It doesn't matter if you're launching it on Linux, Windows, Mac OS. The GIMP takes a little while to start up. It's always been that way, and it still is that way, even with how much faster computers are these days. So this is my favorite image manipulation program, mostly just because I'm most familiar with it. I use others like Krita and some other nice graphic manipulation applications, but GIMP is what I'm most used to, so that's just what I prefer. But anyways, there's GIMP. Now, other things we can do. So we've been over drivers, Wi-Fi, all working. We took a look at the NVIDIA drivers, and we also looked at that Wi-Fi is working. So basically, that's all the software and stuff I wanted to cover for the system. Another thing I wanted to point out is that Ubuntu uses point releases. So, every 6 months they'll do a release, and every 2 years they're going to do a long-term support release. So this version 25.04 is not long-term support. So it's only going to be supported for 9 months, not for multiple years like a long-term support version would. So if you want to install your system and keep it installed for years and not have to update it or reinstall another system, if you want updates, but you don't want to upgrade the system to another point release, don't install this version of Ubuntu. This version of Ubuntu 25.04 is only going to be supported and updated for 9 months since, starting in April of 2025. So, if you want a long-term support version, you're going to want Ubuntu 24.04 or wait until Ubuntu 26.04, right? So anyways, just worth being aware, this version's only supported a little while. So, if you don't want to have to reinstall or completely upgrade your system, don't use this. So, that's basically this version of Ubuntu. Now, I want to, give you my quick summary of my thoughts on Ubuntu and stuff like that. So basically, overall, Ubuntu is a pretty solid OS. And I still think that Ubuntu is, so far from what I've seen and what I've tested out, it is the best It Just Works experience so far, beating both Fedora, Pop! OS, and Linux Mint. Now, a lot of people out there like to knock Ubuntu and complain about Ubuntu, and there are some legitimate things to complain about. A lot of people say, especially Fedora these days is really popular. A lot of people like Fedora, and they like to complain about Ubuntu. Personally, I still think Ubuntu is giving the best It Just Works experience so far. There's some compelling reasons to use either Fedora, Pop! OS, or Mint. But, and I'm not saying, though, that I necessarily think Ubuntu is better than those, but in terms of It Just Works by default, I'd say it is. You don't have to do a lot of work to install extra repos for, multimedia formats and codecs. You don't have to manually install the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. Those are pretty nice, and that makes it a good It Just Works desktop. One hiccup I had was that issue with the network configuration, but that's not a big deal. Just poke around in the GUI and it works great. You don't even need the command line, really. So, Ubuntu has fixed, from my point of view, they fixed GNOME to behave the way I like. Some people prefer vanilla GNOME. A lot of people prefer vanilla GNOME. I like the way Ubuntu does it. I feel like they fixed it to make it work in a really practical, nice way that I prefer. And you don't really need to be messing around with themes with GNOME, although with KDE, that's another story. Now, one thing to point out about Ubuntu is snaps are debatable. They're totally fine. They work great, but there's a lot of criticism, a lot of valid criticism for them. So the one thing that bothers me about snaps, like, I don't care that much that they're proprietary and stuff. It is not kind of like Flatpak a little bit better. There are some advantages of snaps over Flatpak, but that's another story for another day. But basically, the one thing that I don't like about snaps on Ubuntu is the way that apt will redirect you to snaps. I think the way it does that is messed up. If you're installing an apt package and it lets you do that, you should have the option to install apt packages instead of and sometimes you do, like you saw with GIMP, you can install the DEB package through apt or the snap package, but some cases you can't. And I feel like you should always have a choice when the choice is available. Besides the fact that I feel like you should always have the choice when available, I feel like if it is going to give you the option to install an apt, a DEB package using apt, it shouldn't sneakily redirect you to a snap package. I just feel like that's confusing. It causes confusion. It doesn't give you the flexibility to choose, but it causes confusion when you think you're installing one and then it goes to install the other. And this recently caused a minor issue using Ubuntu on DistroBox from Fedora. So I was logged into a Fedora system. I went and I actually put a video out that included this as one of the issues that popped up. I was demoing DistroBox on Fedora, and I went to install an Ubuntu container, basically a GUI container, and I went to install Firefox on it. And I installed it with apt, and it says, hey, you can't launch it. You have to install it with Snap. I installed it with Snap. Then it says, hey, Snapd is not running, and it didn't work. Now, we could have fixed it by installing Snapd, but do I really need to install Snapd in a container just to get Firefox to work in a GUI container? That's a little annoying. You can fix it, but the fact that it doesn't just work by default, and yet you have to go through all that extra stuff, you have all that clutter just to run something in a container. I really don't need Snapd running in a container. So that's a bit of a minor issue that I ran into, something to be aware of. Now, another thing about Ubuntu, I personally don't like NetPlan. I feel it's just another layer of unnecessary complexity. and another thing that sits between you and either Network Manager or Systemd Network D, right? Systemd Network D and Network Manager are the real tools that manage your network for you. And, I feel like NetPlan is just an unnecessary layer of complexity that can break things and cause issues. And it also just generates things. I know I just don't like it. I know there are reasons for it to exist, and it's supposed to be more easy to parse and great for enterprise or cloud environments where you're automatically generating these configuration files and parsing things and stuff like that. And there's a reason it exists. I don't personally like it, though. Now, another thing about Ubuntu, it is a great, it's an enterprise distro. It's a corporate-backed distro. So if that's something you care about, that's a positive thing or a negative thing, depending on how you look at it. One thing about Ubuntu, there's a huge community behind it. There's a lot of support from the community, easy to find answers. Now, it's also commonly used on servers and in the cloud. So if you want your desktop system to be the same that you use on a server or in the cloud, just install Ubuntu on your desktop. Now, so there's huge support for servers, cloud, containers, and more. So it's a great OS to choose for that stuff. A lot of support for that. And again, like I said, if you want your desktop system to be the same that you run on a server, this is a good choice. Now, it is also Ubuntu is supported as the default distro for a lot of software, including proprietary software. Usually, if a piece of proprietary software or really any software is going to support Linux, and they're going to have a specific distro that is supported, it's usually either going to be Ubuntu or Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Either one or the other is going to be the default distro picked, because those are the two main enterprise Linux distributions, the two biggest ones, and they're basically two of the biggest Linux distros that exist, and like the default choices if you want to support a Linux distro with your software. So Ubuntu is not as stable as Debian, but it's still pretty good and still pretty stable. I feel like it's a reasonable balance between stability and having up-to-date software. So I think Ubuntu is a great choice when I want a system that just works for getting things done. So if you want a system for getting work done, you want something to just work, you don't want to tinker with the system, you just want to get it up and running so you can actually do real work. Your focus isn't tinkering with the system, but using the system to actually do stuff, whether it be development, graphic design, whatever you're doing with the system. You want to actually use the system to get work done. I feel like Ubuntu is a great choice for that. I almost feel like this is probably the choice to go with for a desktop system. But that's about it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was interesting or maybe even educational. You might want to give me a thumbs up for this video, and also leave a comment down below. Do you still like Ubuntu? Do you prefer another distro? What's your distro of choice? Leave a comment down below letting us know. And also, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you actually get updates when we come out with new videos. But you don't want to miss out on our other content. We're doing a lot more Linux content. We're going to be doing some more Ubuntu stuff. We're also going to be doing like Arch Linux, Gentoo, Mint, Pop OS. We're testing out all different distros, and we're doing a lot of Linux stuff. We're still also touching Windows, Mac OS, and other stuff. We're doing hardware, software, coding, servers, systems, 3D printing, Raspberry Pis and robots, and lots of great stuff. So yeah, you don't want to miss out on this. Definitely hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. But that's about it for today. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on that next video.